This is Araminta Robertson, and this is SEO in 2025.
Araminta, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My number one SEO tip is primarily for companies in the B2B space that have salespeople. And the tip is, instead of looking at what your competitors are ranking for or going through forums, sit down with your salespeople and interview them about your customer pain points and record those interviews, and then go through those interviews, and you will find an amazing number of topics and keywords that maybe your competitors would never think of, and use those to build your content strategy and rank better for keywords that your customers are actually looking for.
So why salespeople and not other people in the organization?
Well, because I would say the best way to get keywords is to know, what are your customers looking for? What are they reading about? Sometimes that's quite difficult to do. So the second best thing is to talk to the people who are always talking to your customers, who are your salespeople. You could also put customer service in there if you want, but your salespeople are the ones who are asking questions, resolving problems, selling the product. And so, your salespeople are a treasure trove of information, and not using or not talking to them is, you're missing out on a lot of ideas and keywords.
So should you interview all your salespeople or only a select bunch?
It depends on how big your organization is. If you've only got like 3 or 4, I'd interview all of them. I would try and do like 2 or 3, and then maybe every 6 months or every year interview 2 or 3 again, or maybe just 1. You want to keep talking to them and keep that steady flow of information, because new things come up all the time. So you can start with that. And obviously, if you only have 1 salesperson, then just 1. But start with a handful.
Great. Okay. I know that Marcus Sheridan, in one of his books, he advocates interviewing a salesperson or a prominent person like that within the organization, and actually just getting them to record a video and just answering the most common questions that people have, and using that as a video as part of the sales process. I mean, is that part of that, or is that just an entirely different angle to what you're thinking of?
Yeah, that would not be really for SEO, right? That would be more to put it on your website. I think it's a really great piece of advice. So asking your salespeople to answer the most common questions, record that, and then put it on the website. But what I'm talking about here is more interview or talk to your salespeople to understand better what the customer pain points are. And I have a list of questions that I'd love to ask salespeople to get a really deeper and better understanding of, what is my target customer looking for online? What are the problems, and why do they pick us over competitor, for example?
Great. That's a lovely example of a question. Do you have any other questions that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's a whole list, and if you want, I can send you an article where there's like 10 plus questions. But typically, some of my favorite ones are, what are the main pain points of the best customers? This is quite important. Like, who are the best customers? Those that bring in the most amount of revenue, that stay with us the longest, that cause the least amount of headaches. And then, what are their pain points? What are their challenges? I also like to ask, what are the most common reasons that people buy our product, or the most common use cases? I also really like the one where I asked the salesperson, tell me about a recent conversation that you had with prospect. What was the challenge that they were trying to solve? Or just like, what are the alternative products that people compare us to? What are the easiest customers to close, for example? So there's a lot of these kind of questions to really understand how our customers think, prospects, and what the challenges are, and eventually what gets them to pick our product over another one.
So is it with a view to getting a database of keyword phrases and then using content, targeting the phrases that, according to your salespeople, people are likely to be searching for in relation to your product or service?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, instead of like going first to what our competitors are ranking for, start with your customer, start with interviewing your salespeople, and then you can try and see what your competitors are ranking for. Because interviewing your salespeople, even 2 or 3 of them, getting that recording, and then you kind of go through that recording and you're like, oh, that's an interesting keyword. Oh, that's an interesting pain point. I wonder if that's a keyword. So going through that recording, you'll find so many keyword ideas that your competitors probably would never even think of, because they're doing what everyone else is doing, which is seeing what other competitors are ranking for. And so it's a really good way of finding completely new, different, better often keywords that no one else has thought of and that are also very specific to your ideal customer. So for example, we had a client that they're a B2B corporate expense credit card. So businesses use them for expense management and all that. And we were doing their content marketing, and I asked one of their salespeople, tell me about the most recent prospects that was really easy to close. And the salesperson responded with, well, it was someone who was looking for a cheaper alternative to Amex. And so I was like, how would someone put that in a keyword? And after doing a bit of research, SEMrush, Ahrefs, we decided to go after the keyword Amex business card, no fees. And we were able to target that keyword, create a piece of content targeting that keyword. We ranked for it on the first page, and it brought in quite a few leads and customers eventually. So that's an example of how I would have never got that. I mean, perhaps potentially looking through competitors, but hearing it directly from the salesperson was a really good way to get an idea. And also we know that people who are coming in from that keyword will also potentially close more quickly. So that's also a benefit to the business.
Okay, so you've interviewed quite a few salespeople. You've come up with some wonderful keyword phrases, perhaps even 100 different keyword phrases. How do you prioritize what needs to be focused on initially? What content needs to be produced first? Is it, for instance, about the number of searches for a particular keyword phrase? Or do you look at a keyword phrase instinctively as being more relevant to a particular business and not necessarily take keyword volume in mind?
Yeah, no, this is a very good question. I mean, we're an agency that specializes in helping companies generate leads, acquire customers with content. So our primary focus when selecting a keyword is, will this keyword help bring in customers? And so this is where it's a bit more of a art than a hard science. And basically, there's a few different ways to do it. So for example, if we have a client that has Google Ads and has been running Google Ads for a few years, that's a really good place to start. If they've got a lot of non-branded keywords that have been bringing in conversions, we would probably look there. And the ones that have brought in the most amount of conversions, let's start by targeting those organically. And if not, if they don't have that, then it's more of a kind of a hypothesis. So these are some of the keywords that, based on our own experience working in this sector, based on our conversation with the salesperson, and based on kind of our own experience in SEO and content, we think these keywords are going to bring in customers or leads. And so typically, the first 4 or 5 keywords that we're going after are kind of a hypothesis to see if they're going to work or not. And we kind of start from there. There are a few types of keywords that we know are more likely to bring in leads than not. So for example, comparison posts, like X versus Y, we know those do really well. So we'll probably prioritize one of those. But this is where kind of our own experience plus the product, the USPs of the product, and a few different variables will kind of help decide how to prioritize.
And what do you actually do with the content afterwards? Do you ideally have a different page on your website that focuses on each keyword phrase? Or do you actually try and combine them and create perhaps a longer, more authoritative piece?
No, typically for our clients, we would do 1 page per keyword because we found that it's a lot easier to rank high for a keyword when you're going after it with 1 page. If you're going after it with too many different pages, then there's all this cannibalization, and also it's confusing to Google which one should they rank. So we would typically do 1 page, 1 piece of content on the client's website, usually in their blog. It could also be just as a separate page with the goal of ranking for that keyword.
So how often should you attempt to interview these people? I think you mentioned once a year. Is that often enough to ensure that when you go back, you've perhaps got more questions, more keywords that you can obtain from them?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the company and the product, right? If it's a really complex product with a lot of different features, I'd argue maybe you're worth trying to, I know companies where every 2 weeks they meet with the sales team because the sales team will share what they're seeing, what are the problems that people are facing. Because also content isn't just keywords. It's also, we want to create content about current topics and what are people worried about. So in many companies that are on the ball with this, they have a constant flow of communication between the sales team and the content team. If maybe that's not feasible for any reason, maybe once a month, maybe every 3 months, it kind of varies. I think also if you're very new to the company, you'll probably want to see them more often because you're still trying to understand the ideal customer and the product. If you already understand it really well and you're a veteran, then maybe you could say every 6 months. So with our clients, typically also don't forget that The content we create for our clients, nearly all of it is based on an interview with an expert. And often those experts are salespeople, because we're talking about like financial services and technical industries where to sell, you need to know your product really well. And so even just by interviewing them on specific topics, we often get ideas just from that interview as well. So yeah, we would typically like every 6 months, something like that for our clients. But again, it varies depending on yourself and also like product, how complicated it is, and maybe the industry as well.
So you mentioned at the beginning that it could be an option to interview customer service teams, but I think you suggested that salespeople would be the better type of role to interview for these questions. Can customer service teams, for instance, actually perhaps provide different questions or additional insight, or is just interviewing the sales team always the better option to do?
No, definitely. Like when we start working with a client, we'll interview salespeople, product people like product managers, ideally the CEO if possible, or someone in leadership. We'll interview a whole variety of people to get ideas. And customer service, for sure, is a good one. There's just different questions that you can ask them. For example, what are the most common questions that people ask you? What kind of customers are the best kind of customers? It's just different questions. And because they're not actively selling to the prospect, it might be harder to get a good understanding of the pain points and like why, because they're only talking to customers as well, not prospects. And what you really want is information about prospects. But yeah, definitely, if you can, like talk to customer service as well, because they've probably got some really good insights as well.
And do you ever have the video camera on? Do you ever record them on audio and then try and actually incorporate audio or video as part of the content as well?
Oh, in the content itself. So we primarily do written content. Like when we're interviewing everyone, this is for research purposes. So it's all recorded, but it's never made public. So for the content itself, we only do written at the moment. But like you've mentioned, Marcus Sheridan, if you have the resources, definitely video and audio are like great, because some people just want to watch the answer or hear the answer rather than read it.
So many organizations perhaps are content orientated in their acquisition of customers, and they don't necessarily have sales teams or full-time sales teams. So if that's the case, is there any way that type of business can get access to these types of keyword phrases?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a lot easier when you have salespeople, but that doesn't mean that you can't interview people on your team that have a really deep understanding of your target customer. So maybe if you're B2C and you don't have salespeople, maybe your founder or your CEO has a really good understanding of that target customer. And maybe you just want to spend some time interviewing them. Like it doesn't have to be salespeople. What's important is that it's someone who is talking to prospects and customers all the time and has a really good understanding of their pain points and problems. And that's probably a good place to start as well.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time thinking about interviewing salespeople in 2025?
Well, my answer to that is I would spend less time, putting together these huge spreadsheets where you see what all your competitors are ranking for, and you've got the search volume and everything, and you're having to spend time going through that spreadsheet. I think ultimately, if you're doing SEO, probably you're doing it to help with customer acquisition and lead generation. And so start with the people who already know or are already talking to your prospects and customers. And then afterwards, you can look at that spreadsheet. But I would start with that customer research or to get the best keywords, and then only look at your competitors after, and don't spend so much time going through those huge spreadsheets that ultimately might generate the best keywords.
Araminta Robertson is Managing Director at Mint Studios, and you can find her over at mintcopywritingstudios.com. Araminta, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.